2024 has a very favorable Senate map for the GOP. In a best case scenario, how many seats could they realistically win? Let's head to the map. And right off the bat, there are a lot of seats the GOP will definitely win. North Dakota and Wyoming are both states where the incumbent hasn't officially thrown their hat in the ring, but the GOP will win them both. Utah could get interesting if a conservative decides to run on the independent party line, but incumbent Republican Mitt Romney is the frontrunner. Worst case scenario for the GOP here is an independent who caucuses with the Republicans, and that feels pretty unlikely. In Nebraska, Deb Fischer will win the regular election, while Pete Ricketts will win the special election. In Missouri, incumbent Josh Hawley is seeking re-election. He'll likely be running against Larry Kuntz, the runner-up in the 2022 Democratic Senate primary. Hawley managed to unseat a Democrat in 2018, a blue wave year, which I think really speaks to the shifting demographics of Missouri from purplish to deep red. The GOP will win this seat. In Mississippi, incumbent Republican Roger Wicker is seeking re-election. Don't read too much into the competitive gubernatorial election this fall. The GOP easily holds this Senate seat. In Tennessee, incumbent Marsha Blackburn will run again, and she will win again. Indiana will elect a new senator in 2024 as Mike Braun, the current senator, is running for governor. Jim Banks, the House rep from the state's 3rd congressional district, has emerged as the clear frontrunner. He is likely going to win this seat. Regardless of who runs, though, the GOP will hold Indiana. So the GOP's baseline in 2024 is 47 Senate seats. It's an awfully strong starting point, and there are a couple more states on the map where I think they're likely favorites. The first is Florida. Marco Rubio cruised to a double-digit victory in his 2022 Senate race versus Val Demings, which the Democratic Party had hoped to be a bit more competitive. In 2024, Senator Rick Scott is seeking re-election. He managed to win the seat in 2018, as we've said, a blue wave year. Scott unseated incumbent Democrat Bill Nelson by less than 0.2 of a percentage point. Now that Scott is the incumbent and the environment is more favorable for the GOP, I think Scott probably holds onto the seat by several points. I just don't expect him to do as well as Rubio and Ron DeSantis did in 2022. And in Texas, Ted Cruz should be able to hold on to his Senate seat. Cruz was nearly defeated by Beto O'Rourke in 2018, but I don't expect the race to be as close as it was then, as Beto raised an absurd amount of money and the environment was very favorable for the Democrats. Cruz will likely be running against Colin Allred, the House rep from Texas's 32nd congressional district. Polling from this May shows Cruz leading by an average of 6 points, which is what I'd expect the result of this election to be, especially if Donald Trump is the GOP nominee. Trump has underperformed his predecessors in Texas, so that may have more to do with the state's shifting demographics than Trump as a candidate. This brings the GOP to 49 Senate seats, with basically all of the toss-up states left on the map. But before we talk about where else the GOP could win in 2024, let's rule out the states they definitely won't win. In Hawaii, incumbent Democrat Mazie Hirono is running for re-election. She received more than 70% of the vote in 2018. This seat is safe blue. The winner of the California primary will either be Katie Porter, Barbara Lee, or Adam Schiff. None of them are Republicans. This race is safe for the Democratic Party. Staying on the West Coast, incumbent Democrat Maria Cantwell is running for re-election. She is going to win, likely by double digits, safe Democrat. Incumbent Martin Heinrich will hold on to his seat in New Mexico. Now, this one may seem a bit controversial, but I don't think the GOP can win Minnesota even in a best-case scenario. While Minnesota is a state the GOP has had its eyes on for a while, incumbent Democrat Amy Klobuchar is extremely popular. The Democrats also haven't lost Minnesota in a presidential election since 1972, 2024 being a presidential election year. I really don't see a way for the GOP to flip this Senate seat. In Vermont, Bernie Sanders is up for re-election. Sanders still hasn't officially declared his candidacy, which I suppose could open the door for a more liberal Republican. After all, Vermont's Governor Phil Scott is a member of the GOP. That being said, Vermont's politics are dominated by the Democratic Party, and the state hasn't had a Republican senator since Jim Jeffords, who actually switched his party affiliation to independent in 2001. I'm going to operate under the assumption that Bernie Sanders will run again, and if he does run again, he will win comfortably. There's a similar situation in Maine where incumbent Senator Angus King is an independent who caucuses with the Democrats. King is running for re-election, and he has strong approval ratings. I expect King to hold on to his seat by a comfortable margin. In my home state of New York, incumbent Democrat Kirsten Gillibrand is running for re-election, and she will win. And then we have these East Coast states. In Massachusetts, incumbent Democrat Elizabeth Warren is running for re-election. She should win, though I will point out a poll showed her losing a head-to-head matchup against the state's former governor, Charlie Baker. But Baker hasn't expressed any interest in running, and even if he does run, I still think Elizabeth Warren is the favorite. Rhode Island is safe for incumbent Democrat Sheldon Whitehouse, who is seeking re-election. And the same is true in Connecticut for incumbent Democrat Chris Murphy. But New Jersey is a state that has a very small chance of being competitive. Incumbent Democrat Bob Menendez still hasn't officially declared a re-election campaign. He's under investigation for improperly taking gifts from a halal meat business, and it's unclear when that investigation will wrap up or what the verdict will be. I think the only shot at an upset here is if Menendez runs again, wins the nomination, and gets caught in a massive scandal close to Election Day. That feels pretty unlikely to me, so I'm calling New Jersey safe for the Democratic Party. In Delaware, incumbent Democrat Tom Carper won't seek re-election. However, the Democrats will hold on to this seat, and it will very likely be won by Lisa Blunt Rochester. And in Maryland, incumbent Democrat Ben Cardin won't seek re-election. It's going to be a crowded primary field on the Democratic side, but the winner of the primary will go on to win the Senate seat. The only potentially dangerous candidate on the GOP side would have been former Governor Larry Hogan, but he has ruled out a Senate run. Virginia isn't as safe as some of these states that I've just mentioned, but incumbent Democrat Tim Kaine should win re-election. He's popular in Virginia, and he won his Senate race in 2018 by 16%. I've said previously that Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin could make this race competitive, but it really doesn't seem like he's going to run. Additionally, a recent VCU poll showed Kaine leading Youngkin by 5 points head-to-head. I'm giving Virginia to the Democratic Party. I just can't see the GOP winning it, even in a best-case scenario. We have 8 states left on the map, and the GOP just needs 2 of them for a Senate majority, something I'm sure they'd enjoy winning. And if you're enjoying this video, please hit that subscribe button. I think the GOP is in a very strong position to flip West Virginia. Incumbent Joe Manchin is the Democratic Party's only hope of holding onto this seat, and he's still on the fence about actually running, but he has filed paperwork to run. The Republican primary looks to be a somewhat competitive race between Jim Justice, the state's current governor, and Alex Mooney, the House rep from West Virginia's 2nd Congressional District. And things could get ugly in this primary. Mitch McConnell, Lindsey Graham, and the National Republican Senatorial Committee have endorsed Jim Justice. Ted Cruz, Rand Paul, and CPAC have endorsed Alex Mooney. But does it really matter who the GOP nominates? Yes, it does. Polling shows that Jim Justice does significantly better in a head-to-head matchup versus Joe Manchin. A recent Research America poll actually shows Mooney losing to Manchin head-to-head. Fortunately for the West Virginia GOP, primary polls currently show Justice leading Mooney by a considerable margin. For Democrats to hold onto this seat, they'll need Joe Manchin to run again and hope Alex Mooney is the GOP nominee. But even in a Mooney versus Manchin matchup, there's a good chance Mooney could actually win. I think this race is lean Republican regardless of candidate, and I'd almost be tempted to upgrade it to safe Republican if Manchin doesn't seek re-election. Arizona is a state I have talked a lot about. In fact, I just put out a new video on the race now that Blake Masters is planning to run. I've linked to that in the card above. On the GOP side, Kari Lake is the clear front-runner, leading in the polls by 30%. She, or whoever the GOP nominates, will likely be facing Democrat Ruben Gallego and possibly incumbent independent Kyrsten Sinema, who switched her party affiliation last December. We still don't know if Sinema will run again, but she has filed paperwork to do so. Polling shows that Sinema's presence in the race actually hurts the Republican candidate. Ruben Gallego's leads shrink in head-to-head matchups. A recent Emerson poll actually shows him tied head-to-head with Mark Lamb. But there's a lot working against the GOP in Arizona. 2 of their top 3 candidates just lost statewide elections in 2022. The demographic shifts of Arizona are favorable for the Democratic Party, and there may be a ballot initiative that hopes to overturn the state's existing 15-week ban on abortion. While I do think Gallego is the slight favorite at the moment, I do think the GOP would win Arizona in a best-case scenario. This race is a true toss-up, but Republicans make up a plurality of Arizona's voters, and Sinema ruling out a run would be a boost for the GOP's candidate. I really wouldn't be surprised if Sinema doesn't run again, as I think she'd be the least likely of the 3 to win in a 3-way race. With Arizona, the GOP reaches a Senate majority, but it doesn't stop there. In Nevada, incumbent Democrat Jackie Rosen is seeking re-election. She won by 5% in 2018 and maintains decent approval ratings. The Republican primary will be crowded, but it'll also be missing one big name, Adam Laxalt, who almost defeated Catherine Cortez Masto in the 2022 Senate race. However, the GOP field does include two strong candidates, Sam Brown, the runner-up in the 2022 Nevada Senate primary, and Jim Marchant, who ran for Nevada Secretary of State in 2022 and only lost by about 2%, running slightly behind Adam Laxalt. Nevada voted more conservative than the nation in 2022, and it's definitely a state the GOP can flip, as evidenced by Joe Lombardo's win in the 2022 gubernatorial election. Lombardo has strong approvals and could provide a boost to the eventual GOP nominee. In a best-case scenario, the GOP can definitely win Nevada. I think the GOP can also flip Montana. Doing so will be difficult, as incumbent Democrat Jon Tester is seeking re-election. He has very strong approval ratings, but has been hanging on by narrow margins since getting elected in 2006, when he unseated Republican incumbent Conrad Burns. On the GOP side, there may be a competitive primary between businessman Tim Sheehy and House Rep Matt Rosendale. Sheehy has been endorsed by several sitting senators, but that doesn't seem to matter to voters. A new poll conducted by JL Partners shows Rosendale leading Sheehy in the primary by 31 points with just 28% undecided. Matt Rosendale still hasn't officially announced his run, but he has already lost a head-to-head matchup versus Jon Tester in the 2018 Montana Senate race, losing by 3.5%. However, a separate JL Partners poll found that both candidates hold narrow leads over Tester head-to-head. Regardless of who the GOP nominates, I think Montana is a very realistic flip in 2024. Let's move to Wisconsin. I think this one might be controversial. Incumbent Democrat Tammy Baldwin is running for re-election, and she still doesn't have an opponent. House Reps Mike Gallagher, Brian Steele, and Tom Tiffany have all declined to run. Any of them would have made a solid general election candidate. And when we look at the people who have publicly expressed interest in running, David Clark, Scott Mayer, Patrick Schaefer-Wick, I don't think these guys have what it takes to unseat a popular incumbent where Democrats have performed well in recent election cycles. I think there's a reason the top candidates have declined to run, and that's why I don't see the GOP winning Wisconsin in 2024. Leave me a comment down below and tell me why I'm wrong, and just keep in mind that I'm willing to change my mind if a strong candidate emerges. Michigan is another state where I think the GOP will struggle. First and foremost, the Michigan GOP is broke, and that's unfortunate for them as this is a winnable seat. Incumbent Democrat Debbie Stabenow won't seek re-election. A strong candidate in House Rep Alyssa Slotkin has emerged as the frontrunner, but I don't think we should underestimate the power of incumbency. Several Michigan House reps have expressed interest, including Peter Meijer, Bill Huswanga, and Mike Rogers. A primary poll conducted by Emerson shows this is a wide-open race on the GOP side. Another thing that could help the GOP in Michigan in 2024 is the fact that Joe Biden's approval among Michigan independents is minus 36. That could have a serious down-ballot effect on the Senate race. So the question is, can a strong Republican candidate overcome party dysfunction, defeat a strong Democratic Party candidate, and elect the state's first Republican senator in 3 decades? I don't think so. Maybe if the Michigan GOP can get its act together quickly, I'd be open to changing my mind. Ohio is a state where Democrats have a strong incumbent in Sherrod Brown. Brown has strong approval ratings and was re-elected by nearly 7 points in 2018. However, Ohio is trending red. Trump won it comfortably in 2016 and 2020, and J.D. Vance was elected senator by more than 6% in 2022, despite facing a strong candidate on the Democratic side in Tim Ryan. The GOP has 2 strong candidates in State Senator Matt Dolan and Secretary of State Frank LaRose. Dolan finished 3rd in the 2022 GOP Senate primary, trailing Vance by about 10%. The most recent GOP primary poll shows LaRose leading Dolan by 14%, but 43% of voters are still undecided. And really, I think either of them could win this seat. Head-to-head polling shows Sherrod Brown narrowly leading both candidates, but a Suffolk poll did show LaRose tied with Brown. When you consider the political shift we've seen in Ohio, this seat is very winnable for the GOP, and it's something I'd really expect in a red wave year. And that leaves us with Pennsylvania, where incumbent Democrat Bob Casey is seeking re-election. He's a popular senator with a net plus 12 approval rating in Pennsylvania, and he has already been endorsed by John Fetterman and Josh Shapiro, winners of Pennsylvania's statewide elections in 2022. He's likely to face David McCormick, the runner-up in the 2022 Pennsylvania GOP primary. While McCormick hasn't officially declared his candidacy, he has expressed interest and already has the endorsement of Minority Leader Mitch McConnell. I think regardless of who the GOP nominates, Pennsylvania will be tough for their candidate. I think Doug Mastriano and Dr. Oz did no favors for the Pennsylvania GOP. Now, the GOP has to try and unseat a candidate who is more popular than John Fetterman and Joe Biden among Pennsylvania voters. In a red wave year, I see Casey holding on to his Senate seat, leaving us with 54 Republican senators and 46 Democratic senators. I'm sure the GOP would still be happy with that. What do you think is going to happen in 2024? Let me know in the comments section down below. Then check out my next video to see why I think the Democrats are actually going to win Arizona in 2024.